Today's documentary, the Dyatlov Pass Incident, Mystery on the Mountain of the Dead. They fled into a darkness so profound, into a cold so absolute, that it can steal the breath from your lungs just to imagine it. They tore their way out from the inside, ripping through the thick canvas of their tent with a frantic, slashing urgency. They left behind their boots, their coats, their warmest survival gear. In February of 1959, on the eastern slope of a peak called Kholat Syakhl in the frozen heart of the Ural Mountains, 9 highly trained Soviet hikers ran for their lives from a sanctuary of warmth into a killing frost of -30 degrees Celsius. Only the 9 sets of prints, some barefoot, some in socks, some clad in a single boot, trailed away from the slashed opening and down the slope into the dark Siberian forest. This was not an expedition that got lost. This was a camp that was abandoned in a collective, screaming panic, and none of them would survive the night. To understand the depth of the mystery, you must first understand the people who walked into it. They were not tourists. They were elite. The group of 10, which would become 9, was led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, a fifth-year student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute, a brilliant and meticulous engineer in training. His team was composed of fellow students and graduates, all seasoned skiers and hikers, holding the highest Soviet sporting qualification capable of surviving the harsh winter wilderness. Their goal was to achieve the coveted Category 3 hiking certification, the most difficult grade, by traversing the northern Urals. They were equipped with the best gear the state could provide: a sturdy tent, woolen clothing, cameras, diaries, and a 2-month supply of food. Among them was Yuri Doroshenko, the jovial stoker; Zinaida Kolmogorova, the only woman besides Semyon Zolotaryov, a mysterious older man with military bearing who joined last minute; Yuri Krivonischenko, a skilled builder; Rustam Slobodin, a determined athlete; Nikolai Thibault-Brignoles, a translator of French descent; Alexander Kolevatov, a specialist in radioactive materials; and the young couple, Ludmila Dubinina and Alexander Zolotaryov. They were fit, intelligent, prepared, and in high spirits when their train pulled out of Sverdlovsk on January 23, 1959. Their journey began with typical expedition hardships, documented in cheerful diary entries and photographs. They took a truck to the last inhabited settlement, the village of Vizhai, on January 27th. Here, one member, Yuri Yudin, fell seriously ill with crippling joint pain. With deep regret, he turned back on January 28th, becoming the sole survivor of the Dyatlov group. His parting words to his friends would echo with a terrible irony. The remaining 9 pressed on, their skis cutting fresh trails through the deep snow. By February 1st, they began their ascent of Kholat Syakhl. In the local Mansi language, the name is not a welcome one. It translates to Dead Mountain, or Mountain of the Dead. The indigenous Mansi people held it as forbidden territory, a place of bad spirits. Legend held that their women were forbidden to tread on its slopes. The hikers, rational Soviet atheists, dismissed such superstitions. That afternoon, a blizzard caught them, and they lost their direction. Instead of veering west to skirt the peak, they found themselves ascending the slope itself. Igor Dyatlov made a fateful decision. Rather than lose precious altitude and time, he ordered camp to be made on the exposed mountainside, about 300 meters below the summit. They pitched their tent, ate a meal of canned stew, and settled in for the night. The last photograph in their recovered camera shows them smiling, joking, as they set up camp in the gathering gloom. It is the last known image of them alive. Weeks passed with no word. This was not entirely unexpected for a long trek, but by February 20th, concerned families pressured the Institute to launch a search. On February 26th, a military plane spotted the abandoned tent on the slope of Kholat Syakhl. The first rescue team, led by student searchers, reached the site on February 27th. What they found defied all logic. The tent was half collapsed, covered in snow, but standing. A long, vertical gash had been torn from the inside out. Inside, everything was in perfect order for sleeping. Backpacks lined the walls, coats and boots were neatly stored, diaries and cameras were ready for the morning. A pot of water sat ready to be boiled. It was a scene of interrupted domesticity, not of struggle. But the absence was deafening. No one was inside. Following the faint, horrifying trails of footprints, some bare, some in socks, the searchers descended 1.5 kilometers into the sparse forest below. There, under a giant cedar tree, they found the first gruesome scene. The remains of a small fire, and the bodies of Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonischenko. They were clad only in their underwear. The bark of the cedar tree was torn away up to 5 meters high, as if one of them had scrambled frantically up the trunk, trying to see something or escape something. Their hands were burned from tending the feeble fire. They had died of hypothermia. The discovery only deepened the horror and the mystery. Over the next 2 months, as the spring thaw set in, the other bodies were found, scattered in a macabre pattern between the cedar tree and the tent. Rustam Slobodin, Zenaida Kolmogorova, and Igor Dyatlov himself were found closer to the tent, as if they had tried to return. They, too, had succumbed to the cold. But then, in May, under 4 meters of snow in a ravine, the search party discovered the final 4 bodies: Nikolai Thibault-Brignoles, Alexander Kolevatov, Ludmila Dubinina, and Semyon Zolotaryov. They were better dressed, having taken scraps of clothing from the first victims, and their bodies told a story that shattered all conventional explanations. Nikolai had a catastrophic skull fracture. Ludmila and Semyon had massive, crushing chest trauma, broken ribs driven into their hearts and lungs with such force it was likened to a high-speed car crash. Yet there was not a single corresponding external wound on their bodies. No bruising, no lacerations. Ludmila was missing her tongue, her eyes, and part of her lips. A later medical examination concluded this was likely due to rapid post-mortem scavenging and melting snow. But the most chilling detail of all, forensic tests revealed that some of the clothing fragments on these last victims showed elevated levels of radioactive contamination. The official investigation, led by prosecutor Lev Ivanov, was thorough and baffled. There were no signs of a fight, no external attackers. The hikers' valuables were untouched. The radiation was noted but not explained. The bizarre internal injuries were deemed compatible with a force greater than human. Faced with a political imperative to close the case and a complete lack of answers, Ivanov officially terminated the investigation in May 1959, concluding the hikers died from a compelling unknown natural force. The files were sealed. For decades, the Dyatlov Pass incident festered in the Soviet conscience, a ghost story given credence by its official opacity. But the human mind abhors a vacuum, and into that void rushed a torrent of theories, each attempting to explain the unexplainable. The most conventional is the avalanche theory. Perhaps a small, sudden slab of snow hit the tent, causing panic and the slashing exit. It could explain the chest trauma if they were buried. But investigators at the time found no avalanche evidence. The slope was too gentle, and the tent remained standing on its skis. Furthermore, why would an avalanche prompt them to calmly walk 1.5 kilometers away before building a fire? And an avalanche does not cause radioactive clothing or selectively crush ribs without breaking skin. Then come the theories of human conflict. A paranoid confrontation with Montsi hunters? But the Montsi, questioned extensively, had alibis and there were no footprints or signs of struggle. The military theories are more sinister. The region was near a secret missile testing zone. Perhaps the hikers stumbled upon a test of a parachute mine or a sonic weapon, causing panic and internal injuries. The orange tan on some bodies and the odd orange hue of their clothing could hint at chemical exposure. The radiation supports this. Witnesses reported seeing strange spheres of fire in the sky that February. Could it have been a crashed experimental aircraft or a test of a radiological weapon gone wrong, prompting a KGB cover-up? But the most haunting explanations are the natural, yet profoundly strange ones. Infrasound, low-frequency sound waves generated by wind passing over the mountain's peculiar shape, can induce feelings of terror, panic, and even physical distress in humans. The personal cost of this mystery is etched in the lives left behind. Yuri Yudin, the survivor, lived with survivor's guilt for decades, becoming the keeper of the group's memory, forever wondering what his presence might have changed. The families of the hikers were given a state-sanctioned lie, a vague force of nature, and were forbidden from speaking publicly. Their grief was compounded by official silence. So why does this story, over 6 decades old, continue to grip us? It is the perfect mystery. It sits at the intersection of forensic science and folklore, of Cold War secrecy and primal fear. It forces us to confront the limits of our understanding. The pass now bears Igor Dyatlov's name, a permanent memorial to the unfathomable. Their tent still stands in our imagination, its canvas flapping in a wind that carries a warning we have yet to fully decipher. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this documentary, please subscribe to our channel. We bring you fascinating documentaries on history, science, civilizations, mysteries, and the untold stories that shaped our world. Hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you never miss a new release. See you in the next one.